Greetings War Thunderers, this is Longshot bringing you an updated beginner's guide on the user interface in War Thunder. This replaces two videos I'd made several years ago on subjects such as control setup, matchmaking and crew skills. As the game has now changed enough to make both of those old videos obsolete, it was past time for an update. So if you're just getting started with War Thunder and you want to fly fighter planes in arcade or realistic, I do encourage watching this the whole way through. It'll give you a foundation on which to start developing your skills in the game. So, first off, I'll start with a general tour of all of the user interface elements you see around the screen. After that, I'll look at crew skills. I'll look at how the matchmaking currently works in the game, and how that affects setting up a lineup in arcade mode in particular. And lastly, I will go over, and very importantly, I'll go over the control settings, which can be found here, which you really need to get right if you want to get the most performance out of your plane. So to begin with, see I'm in this menu, I'll start with game options. And there's a lot of stuff in this particular section, main parameters, so I'll start at the other end. Let's start simple. Social, Facebook stuff here, I've never used it. That's where you get to it if you want to play with it. If you want music and you want it to come through War Thunder, you do that here. Voice chat, if you want to use War Thunder for it instead of a different platform like Discord or TeamSpeak, you do that there. Sound, okay, here's where you control the sound, the volumes for all sorts of different part of the game. Tinnitus I think only applies to tank battle. Thank goodness for that, I have enough tinnitus of my own. Graphics, now these are much the same as what you'll see in the launcher. However, there is one thing which isn't in the launcher as far as I'm aware, and that's post-FX settings. And here we are, and here you can set all sorts of different effects to control contrast and saturation and all sorts of things like that, to make the game look exactly how you want it to look. That's my setup there. There's also a few predefined ones which you can load and then adjust with these other settings to your liking. Okay, back to the game options. Right, so that's graphics. Lastly, we're at the main parameters. Now I'll try and go through this slowly. Please forgive me if I make mistakes. I always tend to when I look through this kind of thing. Right, so the default view there is third person. If you're flying in realistic or arcade, I would not suggest changing it unless you want to fly in one of these cockpit views and put yourself at a disadvantage to everyone else. You can always do that if you want to enjoy doing that, but otherwise not much point. These things here I've never really messed with much. Automatically joining into squads. This will put you in a squad with another player at random in your team, so that if you actually get kills or stuff like that near each other, you'll get a few bonus points. I generally don't do it. That's why I've got it set to no, because I want to focus on my own flying. I don't want to get distracted by some other teammate who appears to be special. That's up to you. Join already going battles. I think for the arena battles, the random battles that are arcade and realistic, having that set to no makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, you risk joining into a battle when it's already halfway through. And what's the point of that? You want to be involved right from the start. So, yep, got that set to no. Guns targeting distance. I have that set to 400 meters, but this is something you change when you spawn a plane, so it doesn't really matter. Vertical targeting, that will angle the guns up so that the bullets will drop through gravity, such that when they reach the targeting distance, they're on the level with your plane. I find that confusing in some situations. You're not always firing guns in level flight, so I've set that to no. But that's something you can play around with. Bomb fuses, smoke color, all that kind of thing can be set here. Autopilot when you're in gunner sight on a bomber, things like that. Okay, crosshair color and type is where you set those. Indicated airspeed, I've definitely recommend setting that to yes. I think the default was to have it set to no, so it shows you your true speed relative to the ground. But when you're at a higher altitude and you've got less air flowing over your wings because the air's thinner, that's not going to be a great deal of assistance to you, whereas indicated airspeed will tell you you're getting to a speed that's maps too low to perform the maneuvers you might be wanting to perform. So yes, set that one to yes. Show leading is the leading indicator in arcade. If you want to turn that off, here's where you do it. Displaying aircraft damage, see no reason to fiddle with that. Tank battle settings there. I don't play tanks. If you're after help with tanks, I suggest finding a different channel, I'm afraid. Okay, these things here is where you set up the actual colours of the icons you see around friendly and enemy planes in the game. Now, one thing I have done is I've changed the ally colour to a light blue, because I find that far more easy to see than the dark blue, which is the default. I want to know where my allies are, if in case I have to fly toward them or get away from them, depending on what the situation is. But if they're dark blue and I can't see them, there's not much point in having it as that. Okay, here's where you set your measurements. I'm metric, other people will be imperial. You set that all up there. Your preferences as to what markers you want to see on enemy planes and friendlies. Any chat settings, just going through to see if there's anything particularly important in any of these. Autosave replays I definitely have as yes, just in case you need to see a replay afterwards. Okay, that looks like that's about it for this section. So let's move right along. Next up, here is where you access custom battles, and that's where you're flying against AI or just with friends, and a whole stack of solo type missions as well as the tutorials. In the community section, the most important thing here, unless you want to compare yourself to other people or join a squadron, and these social things down here, are replays. And here is where all of your past games will be, going back as far as they are recorded, and it does keep quite a few of them around. And if you want to, the reason I'm pointing this out is because when you're just starting the game, you might think, well, what's the point of replays? They are a great learning tool. If you've done badly in a game, you can look at it and see, well, how did people kill me? What mistakes did I make from someone else's point of view? Or if you see someone else doing really well in a battle, you can again go back and look at the game from their point of view and get some ideas about what they're doing, what choices they made, what strategies they took that made them so effective. It's a wonderful way to learn. I don't think many people make nearly as much use of it as what they possibly could. All right, moving along from there. Squadron stuff here, your own stats are here, including down to the stats of each individual plane, medals and unlocks. If you're going for one of the events, trying to unlock some of the special planes, like the summer event that's been running recently, here's where you'll find that kind of thing. For instance, Operation Summer, and you can see I've hardly done anything because I haven't had the time. But you'll see your status of achievements listed in this section. You can unlock skins for individual planes, that's all here, and decals, etc. How many research points, silver lions and gold lions? And yes, Gaijin have been very generous recently, giving me a whole stack of gold lions to help upgrade higher tiered planes so I can make videos on them, which is very kind of them. The shop is over there, that's pretty straightforward. Okay, these things that are collapsed over here, you can expand them. That one is events and tournaments. By clicking on it, I can see any events or tournaments that are currently running and join them if I wish. And if you want to fly simulator, that is how you fly simulator these days. All right, collapse that back. This one here, let's see what it is. It's a tutorial on tanks. No, thank you. Whatever clear sky is, you can access it there. Down here are your current boosters. Right, that brings us to the plane lineup. You select your nation by clicking on the flag. I know some of this is very obvious. These ones here are less obvious. This will, if it's ticked, it will automatically buy ammunition refills. Now, they don't cost much. I definitely suggest having that ticked. But if you're struggling to maintain a positive silver lions balance, then perhaps you can suggest. I would suggest unticking that. When you become good at the game and you're shooting down lots of planes, silver lions aren't a problem. However, when they are, I know when I first started the game, I had that ticked off, and therefore planes will repair for free, but it'll take some time to do so. So while planes are repairing, you go fly other planes. That's how I got started flying all the nations, in fact. Okay, down here, we've got a lot of information in these plane icons. Let's start with that little number there, 2.7, 3.0, 3.0, etc. That is the battle rating of the plane. And if I bring up the research tab, you'll see it there too. It's the same information. The higher the number, the higher the battle rating. And when you go into a battle, you will see planes that are up to 1.0 above you and 1.0 below you. That's the battle rating spread. So therefore, when you're building a lineup for an arcade battle, you want your planes to be fairly similar. It doesn't make sense to have too wide a spread. However, there is such a thing as averaging down. And what that does is it takes the top three planes, the top three battle ratings you've got in your lineup, and basically averages them. Which basically means, in this case, if I wanted to average down from 3.0, I'd need a 3.0, a 2.7 and a 2.3. Or maybe 3.0 and 2.3, 2.3. But that'll drop me just by one step, down to 2.7 as my battle rating for my lineup. which means I'll see a max 3.7 planes, and I can see right down to 1.7 planes. Instead of if I fly out with what I've got there, that's a 3.0 lineup, so I'll see 2.0 planes or up to 4.0 planes. Okay, that's how averaging works. How it doesn't work, see this lineup here? I've got a 6.0 plane amongst a bunch of 2.3s. Now, a new player might think, well, that'll average my 6.0 plane right down to 4.0 or something like that. It won't. It'll only drop you one step to 5.7. So doing this kind of thing does not make sense. It doesn't work. Right, back to my American lineup. So that is, in a nutshell, how matchmaking works. I've covered that very quickly. One thing that used to happen and no longer does is that tiers were taken into account with matchmaking. You couldn't see a plane that was either more than one tier above or below, or ranks as they're now known. That's no longer the case. For instance, if you're flying this P-36G Hawk, which is rank 1, battle rating of 2.7, you could very easily see in a battle this rank 3 plane with 3.0, which is very, very close in battle ranking range, even though it's a rank 3 instead of a rank 1. It's all just on battle rating now. And some people have a lot of problems with the battle rating system. It was very controversial when it was introduced way back in the end of 2013. Basically, I overcame any qualms I had with the system by deliberately taking low-tiered planes into higher-tiered battles and seeing if I could do really well on them. Because if I could, then I knew that it doesn't matter what the game's throwing at me, I'm going to find a way to be productive and to have a lot of fun. And if you take that attitude into it, then matchmaking really doesn't matter. And I've got a lot of videos that show that. Look for my up-tier videos. I think you'll enjoy them. Okay, I'm digressing. Down here you can create presets of lineups. And you can look at them here. So that's very, very handy to switch between different lineups at different battle ranking ranges. Okay. This little icon you can see in the background, Ace of Spades. That basically means that all of the upgrades, and I'll bring it up, for a plane have been researched. It is fully upgraded, and hence it gets the spade there. That's why I call it spaded. It's a very common term for it. This F4U1D is not yet spaded. I've got a bit of work to do. And here is where I can choose what I'm going to research. I can just click on that, and next time I fly it out to battle, any research points I gain from the battle will go to airframe instead of the current thing which I'm researching, which is new 12mm machine guns. Also in here, you can look at ammunition belts. See, I've got the mouse over the stealth there. Now look at that second line. It reads AP, API, API, I for incendiary, etc. That shows me exactly what is in the belt. Okay, and further down I can see the penetration values. Therefore I can get an idea for which of these belts is most likely to be effective, given the kind of targets that I prefer to shoot at. Next up, let's look at crew skills, because this is a pretty important part of the game. If I right-click, I can see the crew item appearing there. If it has an exclamation mark beside it, see that one doesn't, but this does, that means there's actually some experience to be distributed among your various experience slots in the crew. So let's take a look at that. Here I can see the level of the crew, which is like a total of all the experience I've assigned so far. I can see how many points are available to be distributed, and here I can see how many points it will cost to get the next slot. So that's enough, 431, to increase my keen vision by half of a position there. There are various, you can mouse over each of these to see what they do. They're all important. This is just for gunners, AI gunners on bombers and heavy fighters. It does not affect single engine fighters without a gunner. Logistical services, in particular weapon maintenance, because that does affect jamming and the spread of the weapons, for bombs and rockets anyway. And qualification is also very important. So to illustrate this, I've actually just started on the Italian tree. I haven't gone very far. As you can see, the planes I've got there are all reserve planes. So if I bring up the crew here, you can see that I really haven't progressed very far at all. But what I have done, and this is important, is I've spread out the skills. I haven't tried to build up one of them because each additional slot costs a magnitude more than the previous one did. It's very cheap buying the first one. So the idea is to get this crew level up as quickly as you possibly can. So to do that, I'll even be adding them to the gunner slots next, even if I don't intend to fly gunners with a particular plane. Because as soon as I get that high enough, I can then expert the plane. And to expert this particular plane, I need to get a crew level of 25. What does experting do? Well, if I go back to the American tree, where I have actually experted this plane already, and the next qualification is ace, which takes a long time to unlock, but experting will add +3 onto each of the things you've already unlocked. It's a big boost to all the pilot skills, the gunner skills, and the logistical services, including repair speed. So you want to expert planes as fast as possible. So to build up that crew level as quickly as you can, spread out your skills is the best advice I can give. So I've covered matchmaking, I've covered crew skills. Next, I'm going to move on to the control setup. Now, when you first came into the game, you've probably seen something like this. Now, if you want to fly planes, you would have gone air, and then it gives you a list of choices. Are you setting up for particular types of joystick? And this is new. I haven't seen all these things that they've added to the game, so that's quite nice. You've got some default joystick settings. Hopefully they work well. Haven't played with them. But if you want to go with keyboard and mouse only, and basically that's what most people use in arcade and realistic, so it's what I'll cover in this video, then you would have chosen that. Let's see what that gives us. It gives you left mouse button for firing your guns, and moving down here, it gives you pitch axis of W and S, which is good. It used to be just page up and page down. I'm really glad they've improved that. So they've gone with the WASD setup for the roll, for your pitch, and W is down. It's like pushing the stick forward on a plane. S is up, like pulling the stick back. Q and E. And they've got various other setups. Now, I've created my own custom setup, which actually is not as far removed from this as it would have been in the past. They've got the throttle axis on the wheel. A lot of people prefer to do that. I'll show you what my setup is. And I actually have it saved to a file. There it is there. Okay, it's a bit different. And by the way, before I go any further, here's where, when you've got a setup that you really like, definitely I suggest saving it to a file. Sometimes when the game updates, it can accidentally wipe your setups. It's rare, but it does happen. You don't want to have to go through and recreate everything, but if you've got it saved to a file, you can just reload it back in, and away you go. Okay, so let's go through what these are. These things up here, I don't think you need to worry about. Right, firing your guns. First thing you note, I have not got it set to the left mouse button. I've got it set to space. Reason for that is I found when I was using left mouse button, it would tense my hand up. If my hand's tense, I can't move the mouse to follow targets that well, and I actually move the mouse a little bit, so I throw my aim off. That's just me, but I found that once I actually moved it to spacebar, because that's so easy to hit with a thumb, on the other hand, then I've got one hand for aiming, the other hand for firing, and it made the game so much easier. You can see I've got left control plus space for just firing small caliber guns on the occasions when I might want to do that, and that's more relevant in realistic battles than it is in arcade. Moving on down, therefore I've shifted dropping bomb to a shift plus a space rather than just a space alone. Haven't changed the rockets or reload. Okay, I've got the same WASD set up with my pitch and yaw. I've got some things set up for pedals and so on from when I was messing around with Simulator a long while ago. Let's not worry about that here. I would suggest if you want to change this, just make sure each of these controls are wherever your hand can very easily access them without you having to think about it. Because it's very important you know where they are without having to give it any thought in the heat of battle. Your fingers automatically go to them. Here's where you will want to invert the Y-axis of the aircraft you prefer. When you want to move the mouse up, the plane moves down and vice versa. Some people prefer that. For me, I don't really, but if you're used to flying fight sims in the past, other flight sims, then this might be the way you'd want to go. Okay, here's where we set flaps. Now I have made one change here. See this one? F plus left shift I've added. So I can go Shift F, and that will toggle me down through each of the different flaps down settings. So for instance, if a plane has combat flaps, takeoff flaps, and landing flaps, each of which is a successively sharper angle on the flaps, then I hit that 3 times, I'll be down at landing flaps. Hitting F again will toggle them to off. Okay, whereas if you just got the toggle flap settings alone, that just goes you to the takes you to the nearest flap setting, which will be combat, then off again. These keys over here are too far away from my hand to reach, those square bracket keys, therefore I had to add that in. I haven't changed any of these from the default. Okay, there's a few view controls here. In particular, Because I've taken the firing off my left mouse button, I've added that to the tracking camera. So if I have an enemy selected, which is the middle mouse button by default, I'm pretty sure, then I can then click on the left mouse button and it'll point the camera directly at where the enemy happens to be. And in a tight dogfight, that can be very handy for keeping your eyes on the enemy and not losing track of them. By the same token, this one, look back, can also be very useful. And I've got that to left shift plus mouse button. So if you want to do a very quick check of your tail, just hit that, the camera very quickly swings around, you can see if there's anyone behind you. It's faster than using free look. But like all these things, you've got to get into the habit of using it. But that's where you would set that up. All these things are for joystick control only, as far as I'm aware. So sensor flight is for joystick as well, for in the cockpit, so I wouldn't worry about those. All right. Now, these instructor options are very important. A lot of people call setting these to no as turning off the instructor, which isn't strictly true. The instructor is actually what flies the plane in response to your mouse movements. It moves the control surfaces to try and make the plane follow where your mouse is. So you can't turn that off altogether unless you're getting out of mouse aim mode altogether. But you can turn off these extra features. For instance, this one here restricts control of the airplane near the ground. The idea is it tries to stop the plane from crashing into the ground as much as it can, which is great until you want to fast cap an airfield. It'll stop you from doing it. So if you ever want to cap an airfield in a domination game, you want that set to no. Auto control of landing gear, no, I want my gear going down when I want it to go down, thank you. Same with flaps. Same with engine. I might want to deliberately stall my plane to force an overshoot. I don't want the instructor stepping in and saying, no, your engine has to be at 100% and putting it up to 100% for me. Okay, so it's really good they've made those available to turn off so you can fly the plane yourself instead of the instructor deciding things for you. Okay, now down here, these things are very important. I'll start with smoothing. That's the game kind of second-guessing. How far do you want to move the mouse? I don't want anything second-guessing my mouse movement, so I've turned it off. All of these are things you'll have to play with and get the best setting for you, and test flights are the best way to do that. I haven't shown you how to get into a test flight. I'll show that in just a moment. Okay, so what do these do? Aim sensitivity is how fast the mouse moves around the screen in response to you moving the mouse. So the lower that is, the slower the cursor will move, and the more you'll have to pick up and drop your mouse to move it around. The higher it is, your mouse will zap all over the place and might be a bit hard to control. So it's down to you as to what you want that on, that setting to be on. Aim control sensitivity is a bit more subtle. Again, remembering the instructor is trying to move the controls to follow your mouse. This is how heavy-handed the instructor is in trying to do that. If you have that on 100%, the instructor will be jerking the tail and wing controls on your plane to try and get it to follow the mouse as sharply as it possibly and quickly as it possibly can, which in an arcade battle sounds like it would be good because it makes you turn faster, right? Well, not necessarily. It just makes the plane jerky. And in the situation when you're trying to actually aim at a target and be precise, it can work against you because it can make your plane bounce around way too much in response to very fine mouse movements. I have actually minimized it as far down as it can possibly go, which is 5%. That makes the plane as smooth as possible. And by the way, a smoothly flying plane is a plane that doesn't lose much speed, which is also very important. Okay, so, but this again is something I really suggest going into a test flight and experimenting with. Okay, so that's it for the aircraft control section. The other part is common controls. Here is where you select the control for locking a target or selecting a target. Middle mouse button is what I think is the default. It's definitely what I'm using. I never use these things here. Moving down, there are some important things here. I just want to make sure I don't want to skip anything. Nothing in the interface there, I don't think. No. Okay, these things definitely are. Here's where you have a key for zooming the camera. One thing I skipped. Very sorry, I have to go back. Where are we? Mouse wheel. I have set that instead of throttle to zoom. I have other mouse buttons. I've got a gaming mouse, so I've got some extra buttons. I have some other buttons for the throttle because I wanted to basically just hold a button to move the throttle up or down, and I've also set hold throttle for WEP to no. So once it's wepping, it'll keep wepping until I tell it not to by dropping the throttle again. However, this one here, that frees up the mouse wheel for zooming, so I get a smooth zoom in and out. I prefer that to actually hitting a key, which provides a sharp, sudden zoom in, which often is zooming in a bit too far for me, and I find it disconcerting. So again, that's something that you'll have to look at as far as what your preferences are. That's what I've done. Okay, sorry I skipped that the first time. Back in the common controls. So, yes, down here in the zoom camera, that's where you set up your key for zooming. I've got it to left shift plus Z for zoom. I rarely use it. This is very important, your mouse look. You want to be looking around as much as you possibly can, as a matter of habit. I've got to the C key. I think that's the default. Whatever it is, it's got to be something that's very easy to access under your fingers so that you're using it all the time. Here is how fast the camera will move in response to your mouse movements when you're in free look mode, and the smoothness of the camera when it snaps back to your plane's view when you let go of the C key. Okay, hope that makes sense. Voice message down here. I actually don't use the radio messages in the game. Some people use them a lot, but I generally find so many people spam them with rubbish in battles. I don't want to add to that. One last thing, this is important. When you are zoomed in, how sensitive is the mouse movement? Do you want it to move just a little so that you can have fine controls, or you want it to be faster? That's where you need to get into a test flight, zoom in, and then play with that setting so you get it just how you want it to behave. All right, that's that. One last thing I was going to suggest, test flight. Here's where you'd actually bring a plane into a test flight, and you can also do it from research as well, as long as you have the plane unlocked. There it is. Okay, when you bring up a test flight and you've done it from a plane in your hangar, you can go into Mission Editor. And the Mission Editor, there are all sorts of fun things where you can fly up against AI with a lot of the battles that appear in the custom battles menu you saw earlier. Okay, so that's it for this video. In another one, I was going to include it in this one, but I think this one's gone for long enough. I'll actually show how to use each of those controls and how to get the most out of mouse aim itself in order to perform maneuvers with your plane. So that will be coming soon. Stay tuned. So until then, I'll be seeing you in the skies.